Hi, it's WRTV's Ray Steele. I hope you like this video. In fact, I hope you will click that like button down there and click the subscribe button too so you don't miss the new stuff. Or you can click the subscribe button at the end of this video. Really appreciate it. I'm surprised that we don't have, and I'm dating myself here with this reference, we don't have a Schoolhouse Rock takeoff of Interjection called Insurrection yet, Abdul. Maybe we do. Maybe there's just some, many media outlets we haven't seen it yet. We're going to talk insurrection and another I word, inflation, with our political insiders, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, IndyPolitics.org, and Democratic insider Brian Gaddie. Let's talk inflation first, since the Fed this week raised interest rates by 0.75 of a point. First time they've done that in 20 years. Abdul, economically, this is supposed to stem inflation to help cool things down, but we're probably not going to see a real effect of this for quite some time.
Right. All the experts say it's going to take months, maybe like years, for us to feel the full effects of the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes. Like I said, we got a lot of money floating around from stimulus dollars, and not enough demand, or rather a lot of demand for goods and a lot of money running around, but not so many goods. I mean, this goes back to simple old supply and demand. You got gas prices, $6 in some places for for the top line things. This is really hurting the pockets of Hoosiers, and I'm not really quite sure that the federal government, or for that matter, even the state government, is going to know exactly what to do. I said put more money in Hoosiers' pockets. Once again, the flip side of that is you put more money in their pockets. Okay, that's fine, but the demand is still there, but the number of goods have not increased yet, and so we're going to still get those inflationary pressures, unfortunately.
It looks like that's going to happen if we have this special session that the governor wants to call next month to put more money in Hoosiers' pockets, which, Brian, everybody seems to support. But what about those inflation pressures? I mean, we're not going to get any short-term relief here, it doesn't look like.
Well, the inflationary pressures are affecting all of us. Every one of us, us three, Hoosiers, all of us are being affected. So for the short term, it's going to be really tough. High gas prices, not just high gas prices, products in general are going up. So it's just tough. I mean, I'm not an economist, I'm a businessman, so I'm not going to play economist today on TV. But I would say right now, we might have to do some type of short-term stimulus, whether that's from Governor Holcomb or President Biden. But there's no doubt about it. These high gas prices are having an impact on all of us, no doubt about it.
Brian, there are some Democrats nationally who are making the argument that oil companies are gouging customers because they're making money hand over fist because gas prices are so high, even though right now we talk about supply and demand. The U.S. is producing more oil than any other country in the world, and it's still not enough given what else is happening geopolitically. But do you agree with that argument that oil companies bear some of the blame and they could give some of these profits back to help bring those prices down?
Well, oil companies are taking advantage of the situation, but then again, they're a for-profit business, so it would be very naive on our parts, it's not just Democrats, but Americans in general, to think they will just in some magnanimous way begin to give their profits back to the people. They're not going to do that. This is a situation they're taking advantage of, and they're taking advantage of it. What we have to do is just hope. President Biden's already reached out to the oil companies. I believe he's going to Saudi Arabia, I believe next month. So President Biden's taking all the steps, the right steps to try to mitigate the negative effects of high gas prices. But for the short term, it's going to be tough. And there's no doubt about it. The oil companies are taking advantage of the situation. No doubt about it.
But all due fairness to the oil companies, I didn't see anybody complaining when gas was $2 a gallon during the pandemic, when demand was extremely low because no one was traveling. The oil companies were actually losing money. I didn't see a whole lot of sympathy for that. So oil companies, for some reason, tend to be the bogeyman whenever we have situations like this, when it's a lot more complicated. I'm just saying.
It's easy politically to attack oil companies. They're like the tobacco companies. Nobody hardly likes them, except for people in the oil industry.
Well, and the politicians who get the campaign donations.
Yeah, exactly. And the politicians that get their money.
It's probably more Republicans than Democrats, but certainly some Democrats do get that bill money as well. Let's touch on Saudi Arabia, though, Abdul. President Biden is going to Saudi Arabia just a couple of years after calling them, and some of us would think justifiably, a pariah because their leader had a journalist not only executed, but hacked into pieces. And now all of a sudden, the president, because of where we are with gas prices, is going over there essentially or seemingly to make peace. Hypocritical, or is this just what you have to do?
I think it's just a reality of the world that we live in. I mean, the Saudis aren't necessarily the nicest guys in the world, but they have this one little thing that we kind of need, which is oil. And so when you need oil to to fuel your economy, you can let something. I wouldn't say that necessarily let something slide, but you can put some things in perspective. And I think that's what the president's trying to do, is trying to basically sort of reset the Saudi Arabian relationship. But I think actually more people are upset of the Saudis sort of creating their own version of the PGA than they are over killing the journalists, unfortunately, these days.
And that brings up an interesting point, because I mean, again, Saudi Arabia killed a journalist. They are not a great regime by any stretch of the imagination. But Brian, it seems like we're okay with going to Saudi Arabia, but not as okay with going to, say, Venezuela, which is also a big oil producer, and trying to work with their government. Why the difference there?
Well, because Venezuela is seen as socialist and Saudi Arabia is not. And that's just simple and practical geopolitics. Saudi Arabia we've been working with Saudi Arabia really since World War II. So I can remember seeing in history books pictures of President Roosevelt meeting with the Saudis. So this has been a relationship for a very long time. And again, it just like I talked about before, gentlemen, we have got to start working toward having a green energy based economy. I know that's going to take a while, but we got to get started on it, because as long as we are still so dependent on oil, we're going to be dealing with these oil shocks that affect our economy. We've got to get started moving toward a green energy economy.
And again, that's as we've detailed before, and this is something we could talk about for half an hour or more. We've talked about starting that for decades, and it just never really gets started because we seem to maybe have a period of low gas prices, and everybody forgets about.
President Carter tried to get us on that path, but unfortunately, when he lost his reelection to Ronald Reagan, all that progress that President Carter made was lost, and we're basically playing catch up.
And there were a lot of economic reasons for that, which again that might potentially hamper Democrats during this midterm election here. Let's talk about another issue that certainly might be an election topic, but in the news a lot. The January 6th committee, the House committee investigating the January 6th, 2021 insurrection at the Capitol. Big testimony this week, particularly as it concerns the former Indiana governor and then Vice President Mike Pence, as to how he was treated on January 6th and in the days leading up January 6th. In a nutshell, we know now that the people who were pushing the big lie that the election was stolen knew they were telling a lie, and yet they were telling the public something different. They were taking this to then President Trump, who was on the phone with Mike Pence at the Capitol the day he was supposed to be certifying the electoral vote count for Joe Biden's win. And instead, when the vice president said that he would not go along with the plan, again, regardless of the reasons he did so, the then president called him, might have to bleep this out, a pussy and a wimp over the phone. And of course, then got on Twitter and kind of incited the mob that was gathering at the Capitol to potentially target Mike Pence and members of Congress. Any surprise? We kind of knew this was coming, Abdul, but was there anything at all surprising about the testimony that came out this week?
Like you said, just the language that the president used trying to bully Mike Pence. And I want to say some major props to the one Capitol police officer who basically, when the mob was about 40 feet away from Mike Pence, sort of in a semi-secure area, sort of led them away. I mean, that person is a hero, regardless of what we think about what happened on January 6th. Like I said, I do think once again, these folks should have been tried with sedition and with treason, because they tried to overthrow the legitimate government of the United States of America. And you didn't need sort of one mastermind trying to do this thing. A mob is a mob, and if it's a mob trying to overthrow the government, they should be charged accordingly. I do think, though, Mike Pence deserves some major props when he said, "Look, the founding fathers did not create this country so that one person can determine who the president is going to be." I mean, those words will stick with me for quite a while. And say what you will about Mike and maybe some of his position on some social issues and some other things, by Mike Pence standing up to Donald Trump and refusing to go along with the president's sort of harebrained scheme, I got to give Mike Pence major props.
And Brian, we've seen even a lot of Democrats, including the chairman of the January 6th committee, Representative Benny Thompson of Mississippi, giving Mike Pence those prompts for standing up to Donald Trump. Now, moving forward, that testimony And still, we've got more public hearings to come, more damning testimony, certainly to be made public, a lot that we know of already. It would seem that Democrats, maybe it's just me, I don't seem to be hearing a lot of loud talk outside of where people typically get Democratic information, that, hey, the Republican Party, or a significant part of it, including the nominal head of the party, tried to overthrow the government on January 6th, and just beating that drumbeat into people's heads, especially just a few months out from a midterm election. I know James Carville has talked about this and how Democrats should be repeating that message. Are Democrats saying that loudly enough?
No, we're not. And we do need to follow the wise words of one of my favorite Democrats, James Carville. I'm a James Carville Democrat, no doubt about it. And James is right. We need to be repeating that message over and over and over again. As I said last week, the MAGA movement is the greatest danger to the American Republic since the Confederate States of America. Since the Confederates, Jefferson Davis, Donald Trump. In my opinion, both of them have betrayed their country. And I know that sounds very controversial, but we live in, unfortunately, very crazy, interesting, controversial times. And sometimes you have to just have the courage to stand up for what's right. And this Democrat's also going to praise Mike Pence, as I've done before. Mike Pence did the right thing. Our Constitution and our American democracy and our American Republic was on the line. And Mike Pence stood in the gap. He stood in the breach, and he stood up for what was right. And unfortunately, that's not rewarded in the MAGA-driven Republican Party. Hang Mike Pence was his reward. So to your question, to answer your question directly, Ray, no, we're not doing a very good job as Democrats with talking about this message. But then again, sometimes as Democrats, we struggle with messaging. I think that's the understatement of the day. But no, we're not doing a good job, and we need to do a better job of it.
Do you struggle with messaging? And I'll direct this to Abdul, not that Abdul is a Republican, but or do they struggle with having the type of megaphone to deliver that message the way Republicans have with Fox News and some other outlets? Because just because this testimony came out, just because it's public, and just because we know it's in all likelihood 100% true, Abdul, there are a lot of people who are simply not going to believe it because of where it came from.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are some people who won't believe it because of where it came from, whether it's whether the MSNBC viewer who doesn't watch Fox News, or vice versa. But also something else I think too is that right now, it's if I may quote Bill Clinton, my good friend Brian Gaddie's hero, it's the economy, stupid. The economy is what most people are concerned about. They're concerned about gas prices. They're concerned about inflation, and that is their big thing. Now, granted, is this important? Yes, it is. Does it go to the foundation for our democracy? Yes, it does. But at the same time, though, if you're worried about, okay, how am I going to pay for gas to get to work tomorrow? I mean, a bunch of people in Washington, D.C. talk about something happened a year and a half ago. It's important, but it's not a priority. And I really think that's what it is for a lot of people right now. It's just not a priority. I mean, it's priority for folks like us because that's what we do for a living. But for regular folks, unfortunately, it's not, because they're concerned about other things. Like I said, once again, gas prices and inflation.
So how do Democrats, Brian, how do you think you put this on the equal footing with inflation? Because inflation's not going away. We're probably going to be paying, I don't know if we'll be paying $5 a gallon. We're probably going to be paying a lot more for gas in the coming months. How do you make an attempt to essentially overturn our democracy, overturn the way we have done things for a couple of centuries in the United States, and put that in perspective with, well, yeah, sorry, we're paying a lot for gas, might be paying a little extra for milk for the next few months?
Well, we have to just say to the American people, do you want to reward the party who tried to overthrow our government with giving them partial control of our government? I mean, just imagine that type of succinct, simple message, and hammering it over and over and over again. Because like my good friend Abdul said, we're all political junkies. We love politics. We love the game. But most Americans hate politics. Most Americans don't follow politics. So we've got to be able to have a succinct, simple message. Do you want the party who tried to overthrow our government with giving them partial control of our government? I mean, we have to be able to say that. And then we have to be able to say we're working as hard as we can to try to lower inflation, try to deal with the deleterious effects of high gas prices. But then go back to the fact the Republicans do not deserve to have any control over our government. It's just like a kid that throws a tantrum. They've got to have a timeout. You know, they've got so many issues over there with this MAGA movement, conservatives like Mike Pence being threatened with being killed by other Republican MAGA insurrectionists, terrorists. It just got a lot of problems over there. And until they get it sorted out, I don't think they deserve to have any responsible position with controlling any part of our government until they get it fixed. So they need a timeout.
Very quickly for Abdul, before we move on to some state party politics, we all know that Mike Pence wants to be president. I think it's pretty much a given that he's running in 2024, Abdul. Does information like what come out this week help him in getting the Republican nomination? Or since a majority of Republicans still approve of Donald Trump, at least as of this taping, is this going to actually hurt his cause?
I think it's still a little bit too early. Still remains to be seen. We got still lots of public testimony taken the January 6th commission. I don't think necessarily the Donald Trump supporters are a majority of the Republican Party. I do think they're a plurality, as evidence in some of the more contested primaries that we've seen across the country over the past couple of weeks. So I do think that Trump is a force. I do think his people will, if Mike Pence does decide to run for president, be a hindrance on that effort.
I know that maybe it's a plurality, but some people are either lying to the polls, or a majority of Republicans still say they believe that the 2020 election was stolen. We'll just leave it at that. State party politics, state party conventions are happening this weekend. And so some big happenings, especially on the Republican side. Let's talk about the Democratic convention, though, since your ticket for the midterm elections statewide is already set, Brian. What are we expecting to come out of the state party convention? And we talked about messaging and the Democrats, as you put it, messaging problem. What do you think is going to come out of this weekend that can help Democrats at the ballot box come November?
What I hope comes out of the state convention this weekend, and I'm proud to say one of my favorite Democrats, James Carville, will be our keynote speaker. Very excited about that. But what I'm hoping will come out of our state convention this weekend as Democrats is that we're back. Indiana will no longer be dominated by the Republican Party. We Hoosier Democrats are going to offer a message of hope for Hoosiers. And that includes economic empowerment, putting more dollars in the hands of Hoosiers, and not promoting this right-wing social conservative agenda that really doesn't even care about what the average Hoosier is facing at their pocketbooks, kitchen table issues, but trying to control women's bodies, trying to attack LGBTQ Hoosiers. We got to push back against that. So what I hope we come out of this convention with, as a Hoosier Democrat, as a proud Hoosier Democrat, is that we're back and we're no longer going to be the everlast punching bag of the Hoosier Republicans.
Very quickly, we've just got a couple of minutes left. Abdul, the big news for the Republican convention, the Secretary of State's race, Holly Sullivan, the incumbent, with two challengers for the delegates to choose from. Diego Morales, our old friend, if you will, he's been around in politics, kicking around in a variety of ways, has raised a lot of money, has really been trying to woo the delegates. And also Dave Shelton, who is a county clerk, who has touted the endorsements of a number of other county clerks around the state. Who do you think has the advantage going into the weekend?
Actually, right now, in a weird way, I want to say Dave Shelton, and here's why. Because the Diego Morales delegates hate the Holly Sullivan delegates and vice versa. And so if Dave Shelton, the Knox County clerk, can come in either first or second in those first couple rounds of balloting, I think he wins. If he knocks off a Holly Sullivan or Diego Morales, because the Diego people and the Holly Sullivan people are not going to support the other candidate. So I think Dave Shelton sort of has a lead, and also picked some momentum, like you said, with endorsement like over 60 county clerks, which go to the heart of elections. But once again, it's a convention. Anything can happen, as we've seen these things happen before. But right now, I think Dave Shelton has an inside track to his party's nomination. But then again, that remains to be seen. You got a treasurer's race, which is take a dart, throw it against the wall, and it's anybody's guess right now.
We'll know about that next week, and that's when we'll talk to our insiders again. Brian Gaddie, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray. Happy Juneteenth, everybody.